Whispers Around the World, a Heal Our World book from SufferingWell. Chapter 15, Prayerwalking. The group met early one Saturday morning, a light mist hanging in the air as the sun peeked over the horizon. Paulette greeted each of them with a sunny smile as they gathered in the small park at the edge of town. Beth Ann, Donna, Ken, Frank, and Ronald all exchanged curious glances, not entirely sure what to expect. Paulette clapped her hands together, beaming. "Thank you all for coming. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to something that has become a powerful part of my own spiritual life, prayer walking." Ken raised an eyebrow, grinning. "Prayer walking? You mean we'll be praying as we walk?" Paulette nodded. "Exactly. It's a way to bring our prayers outside the walls of a church or home and into the world. As we walk, we'll be praying for the people and places we pass. Sometimes I focus on the homes I pass, asking God to bless the families inside. Other times I pray for anyone I see along the way, lifting up silent prayers for them." Donna's face softened as she took in Paulette's words. "That sounds beautiful. I've never thought of prayer as something I could do while I'm out in the world like this." "That's the idea," Paulette replied. "We often think of prayer as something we do in solitude, and that's wonderful. But prayer walking allows us to bring God's presence into the streets, to be aware of the needs around us, and to invite His love and healing into every corner of our community." Frank looked intrigued, his hands resting in his pockets. "So, do we pray out loud, or—" Paulette smiled, shaking her head. "You can pray however you're comfortable. I usually pray quietly to myself, but you can also speak your prayers aloud if you'd like, especially if you team up with someone. There are no strict rules, just an open heart and a willingness to be alert to hints of needs. Sometimes I'll ask God to show me specific things to pray for as I walk, and other times I'll just pray for general peace and blessings. Let's start by walking together, and I'll guide you through it." They began their walk along the quiet neighborhood street, the group falling into a comfortable rhythm beside Paulette. As they moved, she led them in a simple prayer, her voice soft yet filled with conviction. "Lord, as we walk, we ask you to open our hearts and guide our steps. Show us the needs around us, and let our prayers bring your love and healing to this community." They walked in silence for a few minutes, each person settling into their own thoughts. Beth Ann found herself looking at the homes they passed, imagining the lives behind each door. She whispered a prayer for the families inside, asking God to bring peace to their hearts and protection over their homes. Paulette smiled, noticing Beth Ann's concentration. "That's it, Beth Ann. As we walk, we can pray for anything that comes to mind. Sometimes I even feel prompted to pray for specific things, like a struggling marriage or a child going through a difficult time. It's amazing how God brings those needs to our hearts." Donna reached out, touching the branch of a tree as they passed. "This reminds me that we're connected to each other in ways we don't always see. I'm praying for the people who feel lonely, that they know they're not alone." Ken walked quietly, his eyes scanning the neighborhood with a newfound awareness. He began to pray for the people who might be struggling silently, hidden behind closed doors, asking God to bring light into any darkness they were facing. They paused at a small playground where a few children were playing. Paulette nodded toward them, her voice tender. "This is a perfect moment to pray for the next generation. I like to pray for the children in our community, asking God to protect them, to guide them, and to let them grow up surrounded by love." Ronald, who had been quietly observing, spoke up, his voice low but resolute. "I'm praying for the parents, too. Life has changed so much for families over the years. I hope they have the strength and wisdom to raise their kids well, even with all the challenges today." Frank looked down, his face contemplative. "I'll pray for the people out here who don't know where their next meal is coming from. I know what that feels like. God, may you meet their needs and bring them peace." As they continued their walk, Paulette led them in prayers for the local businesses they passed, for the health and safety of the elderly residents they saw in a nearby garden, and for the people working hard behind the scenes to keep the community running. Each member of the group took turns sharing what was on their heart, praying for their neighbors, for each other, and for the world. They rounded a corner, reaching the end of the street, where they paused for a moment to look back at the path they had walked. Paulette turned to them, her face glowing with gratitude. "Thank you for joining me today. Prayer walking is simple, but it's a powerful reminder that our prayers can touch every part of the world around us. And as we pray for others, our own hearts are transformed." Beth Ann looked around, a newfound lightness in her eyes. "I didn't expect this to feel so meaningful, but it does. I feel more connected, not just to God, but to this community." Ken nodded. "It's like we're bringing heaven's love into each step, each moment. I'm definitely doing this again." Frank smiled, his expression thoughtful. "Me too. I'm realizing that prayer doesn't have to be just words or thoughts. It's something we can live out, something that connects us all." Ronald placed a hand on Paulette's shoulder. "Thank you, Paulette. You've given us something special here." Paulette smiled, deeply moved. "Thank you all for joining me. Let's keep bringing these prayers into the world. Who knows how many lives might be touched by a prayer we whisper as we walk." As they walked back together, each of them felt the impact of the morning's journey, carrying the simple yet profound reminder that prayer was not only a personal connection with God, but a bridge to the world around them, transforming hearts and lives one step at a time. As the How group gathered on Zoom for their weekly meeting, Donna leaned in with a keen smile, clearly eager to share. "Everyone, this is Donna. She's come at the invitation of Audrey and Patricia, and she lives here in the park with a few of us." Donna waved, and they all welcomed her at once. "Hi, everyone. I wanted to tell you about something wonderful some of us did with Paulette this past weekend. She took us prayer walking." The group looked intrigued, several people nodding encouragingly. Rhonda's face brightened. "Prayer walking? I've heard of that, but I've never tried it. What was it like?" Donna's smile widened. "It was beautiful. We walked through the neighborhood, just observing and prayed for the people and places we saw. Paulette explained that prayer walking is a way to bring our prayers out into the world, asking God to bless every person, every home, and every place we passed." Ken chimed in, nodding. "Yeah, I didn't know what to expect at first, but it really felt powerful. We prayed for families, kids, workers, everyone we saw. It opened my eyes to the needs around us in ways I hadn't noticed before." Ronald added, "And it's simple, really, just walking and praying, but it felt like each prayer was a small gift to the people we were passing by, a way to spread God's love without them even knowing." Yuri looked thoughtful, then smiled. "This ties perfectly into what we're trying to do with the How initiative, doesn't it? We're called to pray for healing and transformation, not only in our own lives, but for the world around us. Prayer walking makes that mission tangible." The group nodded, each reflecting on how this new approach resonated with their shared purpose. Fred spoke up, his voice filled with emotion. "It reminds me that we're not just praying for abstract concepts. We're praying for real people, real lives, and walking through our neighborhoods in prayer is a way of saying, 'God, bring your love to this exact place.'" He turned to Rhonda. "We could do this on the ship or out wherever we're touring." "I like that idea, sweetheart," Rhonda added. "It also brings us closer to the heart of what 2 Chronicles 7:14 calls us to. Humble ourselves, seeking God's face, and praying for our land." If we're out there, walking and praying, we're doing exactly that. We're asking God to bring healing right here, right now. Donna's eyes sparkled as she listened to everyone's reflections. Yes, that's exactly it. And you know, It's something we can all do wherever we are. We may not be able to travel to the countries we're praying for, but we can walk and pray for our own communities, trusting that God hears each prayer and will respond. And as we see things to pray for, Fred added, it might also give us ideas of what to pray for individuals in the countries we've chosen. Ronald nodded, visibly moved. I've spent a lot of time feeling disconnected, but being part of that prayer walk made me feel like I was finally part of something bigger. We were out there, asking God to bring His love into the world, one step at a time. I realized that prayer really is an act of faith, believing that God is present right where we are, ready to touch lives. The group sat quietly for a moment, each person reflecting on the impact of Donna's story. Yuri finally spoke, her voice quiet but resolute. I think we should all try this. Let's make prayer walking a part of what we do in the How Initiative. We can pray for our chosen countries, but we can also walk through our neighborhoods praying for the people around us. This is a way to live out our mission, to be the hands and feet of Christ in our own communities. There was a ripple of agreement, each member nodding, visibly moved by the idea. Ken smiled. Yes, let's do it. Prayer walking is just another way for us to seek God's face and ask Him to bring healing, not only to distant places, but to our own streets, our own homes. That evening, the How group left the meeting with a renewed sense of purpose, each of them inspired by the simple yet profound act of prayer walking. They knew they were being called to bring their prayers to life, to invite God's love into the world in ways they had never imagined. And together, they resolved to keep walking, keep praying, and keep trusting that God would move in and through them wherever they went.